Welcome to the Frequency Labyrinth. I am Adrienne McDonald, your host. This podcast is for you if you're done with surface level self-help and ready for something deeper and actually transformative. Around here, we work with ancient wisdom, human design, gene keys, and shamanic practices, not as knowledge to collect, but as tools to live by. This isn't about one size fits all. It's about learning to work with your energy, your design, and your life. This is about integration and embodiment. We go deep here with ancient wisdom, practical integration, so that you can develop ironclad self-trust. Let's get into it. Hello, beautiful humans, and welcome back, or welcome if it's your first time. Today, I want to continue our conversation about building out your spiritual support structure, specifically building out your spiritual support team. I keep hearing the same thing from clients, from people in my circles, from listeners. I don't feel grounded. I don't feel supported. I don't feel like I have anything holding me steady. And as we've said, there's a lot of noise in the world right now, a lot of disconnection, a lot of people that feel like they're not anchored, they feel reactive, overwhelmed, or even quietly running on empty, even though they're making it look good for social media. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to create this series. Clarity does not emerge from white-knuckling your way through life. And nobody, and I mean nobody, is meant to navigate seasons of chaos and uncertainty and transition, or even rapid growth, without a support structure, not emotionally, spiritually, or energetically. And I feel like that's where your spiritual support team comes in. And I think everyone needs a spiritual support team because there is so much disconnection in the world right now. And I also feel like there's many paths to being in relationship with that kind of support. You have to find what works for you. And I'm going to be talking today about what helped me. And not necessarily something mystical that you can outsource your life to, but think of it more as a living ecosystem of relationships in the unseen world that help you and hold you when everything else feels unsteady or shifting. Your guides aren't here to run your life. They're here to give you the stabilizing presence that helps you connect back to yourself when everything around you is shifting. And what I find interesting in the spiritual community is we talk a lot about support during the hard seasons, but support is not just for the hard seasons. It's for the expansive ones too. The moments when life is opening up, when opportunities are arriving, when you're stepping into that big version of yourself or a bigger version of yourself. Growth requires just as much grounding as crisis does. Prosperity requires as much clarity as uncertainty does. Support isn't a luxury. It's a part of staying in right relationship with your own energy, your own purpose, and your own inner knowing. So today, we are going to talk about one piece of that ecosystem, your guides, and specifically the ones that probably have been with you longer than you've been aware of them. And there are different types of guides. There's teaching guides, and there's healing guides. And the one that I tend to think of as a great starting point is the guardian guide, because its role is to help you keep your energy as steady as possible as you move through the world and navigate things. So I also believe that everyone's intuitive, but if you're overwhelmed, intuitive doesn't really feel like guidance. It feels like overload. It feels like anxiety. It feels like reactivity sometimes, or second guessing everything you feel, because there's no internal anchor to help you sort through what's actually yours versus what you're absorbing. And, there's a lot of stuff out there about where people are waking up spiritually faster than ever before. But are they really grounding themselves spiritually? And when we have those channels open, when our instincts sharpen, when the sensitivity expands, but there's nothing to put it, there's not a place, a container to hold that increased capacity, that can be a little overwhelming. So instead of intuition becoming a strength, it becomes something you feel like you need to manage. And instead of feeling connected, you feel overstimulated. Instead of feeling guided, you feel somewhat unprotected. And none of that is because something is really wrong. It's because you're doing all of this without a support structure. And in every ancient tradition, people weren't left to figure it out all alone. They had guides. They had elders, allies, rituals, practices. They had this spiritual container. But modern spirituality tends to hand people hacks or insight without frameworks, encourages people to chase ascension or expansion without grounding or very little grounding. And that can be problematic and disorienting. When that happens, even the most intuitive person can feel like they're drowning in their inner world. And that's another reason why a spiritual team matters. Not to turn your sensitivity down, but to give you a structure or a framework to work with, to help you differentiate between, hey, I'm listening to my instincts and my intuition versus my fear, to help you feel held so that your intuition doesn't overwhelm your nervous system, to help you stay connected instead of reactive, receptive instead of porous, and grounded instead of feeling like you're spinning in circles. Because being sensitive isn't the problem. It's trying to navigate everything by yourself. And the idea of spiritual guides isn't some modern new age invention. Humans have always known they needed support beyond what the physical world could provide for thousands of years. Every culture, every lineage, every spiritual tradition has its own way of naming the presence that walks with us, the guardian at the threshold, the ancestral ally, the protector spirit, the daemon, the helping spirit, the companion in the other world. These metaphors are really descriptions of a relational reality that people lived with long before we had language for things like intuition, energy, and sensitivity. You knew not to journey into the other world alone. You went with a guide who understood the terrain, that could navigate the liminal spaces, who held the perimeter while you received what you needed. In Greek philosophy, your daemon wasn't just a voice in your head. It was a guiding presence that shaped your path by sharpening your instincts and nudging you towards your destiny. In indigenous and shamanic traditions around the world, a spirit ally wasn't optional, it was essential. Not just as a symbol, but as a real relationship that matured over time through trust and respect. And here's what's fascinating. Even within our modern mythologies, if you will, movies, we instinctively recreate this pattern. Watch almost any sci-fi or fantasy narrative, and you'll see it. The protagonist doesn't just step into the unknown without a guide or an anchor. Neo, he has Morpheus before he enters into the Matrix. Luke has Obi-Wan Kenobi when he starts to really interact with the Force. Even in shows like Stranger Things, the characters learn you don't access the upside down without somebody grounding you from the other side. The story knows venturing into all altered realms without an anchor isn't heroic, it's destabilizing. And humans need support when they cross thresholds. We've always known this, even when we're telling it with like special effects and soundtracks. And with all of these traditions, ancient and modern, recognizing something is that it's important to realize that you don't enter in deeper states of altered consciousness without support. And not because the unseen world is particularly dangerous, although it can be. It's because navigating expanded consciousness requires a certain level of anchoring and grounding. It requires relationship. It requires a stabilizing presence that helps you stay connected to yourself while you're moving through the layers of experience. Now, guides are never meant to replace your wisdom or override your agency. They're a part of a spiritual ecosystem designed to help humans stay oriented and supported and grounded while engaging with things that are bigger than themselves. And once you recognize that, something shifts, because this isn't necessarily inventing a relationship. It's sort of like a remembering of one or a reclamation of one. Because, as I said, humans have been living like this for thousands of years, a way that honors connection, reciprocity, and the understanding that we're not meant to do all of this alone. When people hear the term guide, I feel like there's a lot of assumptions that rush in, and some of them are romanticized, some of them are influenced by pop spirituality on social media, some are fear-based. But the role of the guide, I don't feel like it's glamorous, but I don't think it's ominous either. It can be profoundly practical. A guide is a stabilizing presence that stands at the threshold of your inner world and the unseen world and the waking world. And their function is to help you stay oriented, anchored. They don't walk the path for you. They anchor you so you can walk it without losing yourself to other influences. And it's that presence that helps you stay in your body and in yourself, and your intuition opens, your sensitivity spikes, your emotional world feels a little bit louder than your logic. They help with setting boundaries and discerning what's yours and what isn't. And they hold that perimeter so that you're not walking into meditation or journeying or any sort of big emotional terrain unaccompanied. They steady you. It's like having a hand on your back. They fortify you. That they really do have your back. They're not here to make decisions or to bypass your own discernment, though. That's really important to remember. You don't lose agency working with guides. And the role isn't to remove all the challenges of being human either. I mean, we are spiritual beings here on this earth to have a human experience. It's just a help to stay connected to the higher version of yourself, so you don't have to be alone. Now, most people think that meeting a guide is like fireworks going off, some sort of big thing where they feel like that all doubt will be absolved. I think that can happen. I don't think that's a common thing when you first meet a guide. They assume that they'll see a figure, hear a voice, receive a message, and have some sort of dramatic experience. And in my experience, and people that I know that have been doing this for a while, a real spiritual relationship doesn't begin with a spectacle. It begins very subtly. Guides don't force themselves into your awareness. They meet you at a level your system can receive. And for most people, that is far quieter and in a much more embodied way than they expect. And another reason people struggle is because they approach meeting guides like it's an audition. They're waiting to see something impressive or mystical or visually extraordinary so they can label it real. They want validation more than they want relationship. They want a sign more than they want connection. And without realizing it, that creates a certain level of pressure. It puts them in their heads and makes them question every impression. It turns the whole experience into a test instead of a meeting. And guides don't show up well in that environment, not because they're withholding, but relationship can't grow in contraction and expectation and self-doubt. And I also feel like there's something else happening beneath the surface. Many people have already felt, say, their guardian guide without even realizing that's who it was. That grounding that comes out of nowhere when you're overwhelmed, or a sudden calm feeling that comes in at a moment of intensity. Like you'll feel a sudden shift in your energetic field when you're meditating or trying to journey. That sense of someone's here without a visual to match it, that instinctive knowing that you're not alone, even in silence. Sometimes that's the guide that has already stepped in, and the mind just doesn't know how to categorize it yet. And the other thing I would say is, in a lot of modern spiritual teachings, people are trained to be consumers of experience, not participants in relationships. People seek the moment, the vision, the message, the proof, instead of cultivating conditions where a relationship can grow slowly and steadily and organically. Meaning, meeting a guide isn't a one-time thing. It's a process of building of trust. It's the more grounded you become, the clearer the presence gets. The more you show up without trying to force things, the more your guide can meet you. The more you stop chasing the spectacle, the more you recognize what's been with you all along. So when someone says, I've tried, but I don't think I'm connecting to anything or anyone, what's usually true is this: they're not missing the guide necessarily. They might be missing the quiet. They're missing the softness. They're missing the subtle way the relationship begins. And once they shift their expectations, once they stop expecting the unseen world to perform for them, the relationship opens. And that's not with fireworks, but with recognition and respect, not with, big visions, but with presence. And with presence, not image or what you have worked up in your head, that's the actual beginning. And one of the other things is important to understand that about guides is their communication doesn't fit neatly into one particular category. Sometimes the connection is unmistakably internal, a shift in your energy, a knowing that rises before logic, a grounding that feels like it came out of nowhere. And sometimes the communication is external, symbols that show up with uncanny timing, synchronicities that follow you around all day. Words or impressions that just sort of drop into your mind with super clarity that you could not, you couldn't have manufactured that if you wanted to. Guides use whatever channel you're able to receive in the moment. I do feel like the signature of that communication is pretty consistent, though, because it feels coherent. It doesn't, most of the time, I would say it doesn't disorient you or pull you out of yourself. I think sometimes we get pieces of information that might hey, what was that? But it very quickly you come back. And even if it arrives from the outside through an image or an animal or a line in a book or something that you're reading, something jumps out at you, something inside of you lights up in recognition. There's an internal resonance that's yeah, that, I got that. And guides don't communicate to impress you. They communicate to align you with your highest good. I think that, so whether the message comes through your body, your thoughts, the environment, or a moment of direct intuitive download, the effect is the same. You feel more connected to yourself, not less. And over time, the communication deepens. It becomes clearer, more distinct, more conversational. Some people begin receiving impressions, images, or direct intuitive information. Others may experience patterns or symbols or dream messages or repeating experiences like that are acting as mirrors. Their guides are fluid in the way they speak because their aim isn't to teach you a single method. It's to meet you in the language that you already speak, that your soul already speaks. And the guide communication's goal is to expand your capacity, not your confusion. Feels like an orientation, not overwhelm. It brings you deeper into yourself, not farther away. And the more you learn about your own intuitive language, the more easily you're going to recognize when you're in conversation with something that's wise and steady and maybe slightly beyond your ordinary awareness. I think this is another reason why I like human design, because human design, your chart gives you some insight into how your intuitive awareness wants to come through you. So it's a great tool for that. Now, when my guides came through, there were no lightning bolts or booming voices saying, I'm here. Now, I've had some very, what I would call dramatic experiences. And I'm not saying that those don't happen, but in the beginning, it was pretty subtle. It was like someone walked into the room, and not physically, but like energetically, and there was a shift. And I was like, oh, I'm not alone. I don't feel alone. I feel seen in a way that I had not felt seen before. And I didn't really have, like, my system responded before I had language for what I was experiencing, because it wasn't fear and it wasn't like, it felt like I vibed, right? It was that deep cellular sense of, oh, I'm not alone. And it gave me a reference point, a steady presence that I could return to over and over, especially when life gets a little chaotic or when things get a little bit more overwhelming, or if I just need guidance. I just need someone to hear me out here. And, sometimes I'll be talking to the air, I'm not gonna lie. But there's a quality to it, a certain steadiness, a certain clarity that I've just learned to trust. And the support isn't constant in the sense of, oh, I'm always getting pings or messages. It's constant in the way that it's available. I don't feel alone, even if I'm confused and when I'm uncertain, or if I'm in a season of transition, or I've gone down the spiral like we all do on occasion. I know I feel accompanied. I feel like something's there. I can feel like I can access support at any time. And not because my guide's on call, but because the relationship has depth. It's grown roots. It's been nurtured through the thick and the thin, not just in the moments where I feel challenged, but also when I felt joy, right? Where things have felt mystical or meaningful, like through everything, not just the bad and not just the good. Now, I will say, sometimes guidance doesn't always arrive fully formed. Sometimes I receive information that doesn't make sense immediately, Sometimes it takes a while I'm like, oh yeah, okay, all right. And instead of assuming, like I feel like in the very beginning there was these like, well, I just must have missed it, or I'm not getting this, or whatnot. I've learned to stay in the conversation. I ask for more. I ask for clarity. I ask for a different angle. That's part of the relationship too, not demanding answers on my timeline, but engaging with guidance that's in a way where you'd engage in dialogue with someone you trust. And that, probably more than any single moment, is what changed everything for me. It's that there was a maturation of the relationship then. It became something steady, something reliable, something I could lean into without questioning if I was imagining it or not. And not because it was always loud or obvious, but because the accessibility was consistent and it showed up through the thick and thin, the hard seasons, the good seasons, the confusing seasons, the quiet seasons, through all of the seasons, because we all go through cycles. And I feel like what I took away from that is you don't build trust by waiting for a big moment. You build trust by showing up in the small moments over and over until the relationship becomes part of your inner landscape. And over time, something shifts. You stop wondering if you're being heard and start noticing that the communication sort of has a rhythm. And again, not constant nattering, but it's steady. And sometimes the guidance arrives in a calm setting in your body. And sometimes it's that knowing that drops in whole. And sometimes it's information that drops in and you're not sure until days later. And you learn to stay in the conversation, not demanding clarity, but by engaging with it, asking for more, asking differently, staying in curiosity. Really, curiosity, I think, is one of the best ways to engage with your guides, because I think that helps deepen the relationship. And as you progress with that, you realize that you're no longer meeting your emotions alone. Like that emotional roller coaster gets a little smoother. The intensity that used to overwhelm you now has a little bit of a buffer. And not because you're suppressing anything, but because something in you remains anchored during the storm. Your reactivity softens, your intuition sharpens. You can feel the difference between fear and instinct, between projection and perception, because there's a steady presence helping you stay connected to yourself long enough to discern what is real and what is true for you. And you also start trusting yourself in a way that you didn't before. And it's not that your guide is handing you the answers. It's that the relationship supports your capacity to hear your own. You make decisions without second guessing all the time. You set boundaries with less internal conflict. You start listening to your timing instead of overriding it out of pressure or fear or expectation. There's a groundedness that wasn't there before. And it's not loud and it's not dramatic, but it is unmistakable that it's there. What surprises me a lot about this companionship is just as much about expansion as it is hardship. When life is growing, when opportunities appear, when you feel like you're stretching into that bigger version of yourself, as I said before, you need just as much support, just as much grounding, just as much orientation. And a guide can help you metabolize growth just as much as grief. They help you stay inside your own center when momentum picks up, when visibility increases, when your old fears want to pull you back into familiar patterns. That is worth its weight in gold and more. Keeps your ego in check too, 100%. I can attest to that. And eventually, over time, your relationship with your guide stop feeling like you're something that you Like I got to go and purposely reach for it, and starts feeling like something's just like it's just with you, a presence that you can lean into. The formal journeying that so many of us start off with, meeting our guides and having conversations, although I still do that, it's not as, I don't feel like it's required. I don't have to set up the formal sessions like I thought I did towards the very, very beginning of this work. It's like Danny was talking about in our last episode. She's like, she's a busy mom. She can't be setting that up all the time. She can connect with her guides even when she's washing the dishes. So you don't have to earn this steadiness either. You know, that this is just part of being this spiritual being in this human experience. There's no hoops that you have to jump through in order to earn the right to have a spiritual practice like this. Now, I'm going to be closing out. You've heard something today that stirred something in you, a curiosity, a sense that maybe you felt a presence and you didn't know how to name it. I did create something that will help you take the next step. I recorded a guided journey specifically to introduce you to a guardian guide. And I think that that's a great one to start with, because a guardian guide is there to help protect your energy and help protect your space and help you with boundaries and that sort of thing. And it uses some threshold imagery I use in my own shamanic work, and I hope you find it useful. I will put the link to access that in the show notes. I do want to say this clearly. You may not see anything. You may feel something. You may sense a presence. You may receive an impression, a symbol, a shift in the air. You may walk away with something that doesn't quite make sense right away, and then may clear up over time. And all of that is communication. All of that is relationship. And you may fall asleep the first time. You can go over it a couple of times and see what you connect with. So if you're ready, or even if you're just curious, that'll be available for you. And what matters is that you show up honestly, that you enter the journey without pressure or expectation. And what matters is that you allow the relationship to meet you where you are. So I would advise you to give yourself some space before and after. Notice what shifts, even if it's subtle. And I assure you, your guardian guide has been with you far longer than you've been aware of them. This journey is simply a doorway of sorts. So that's it for today. We will sign off now. And if you find this helpful, please share it out. And as always, remember to find beauty every day and seek the magic in the mundane. Thanks for tuning in today. As always, take what resonates, leave the rest. Let whatever landed move through you in whatever way it needs to or wants to. And also, if you want to explore more, you'll find more information in the show notes. If this episode stirred something in you, please share it out or leave a quick review. It helps so much, and I really appreciate it. And remember, this work is about integration, and it always starts with self-trust.